Hello, everyone. I almost clicked the wrong button.
Oh, no.
We would have cut to a shot of nobody. Hope everybody's doing well. My name is Caleb, and this is my friend, Nick. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. I noticed you didn't introduce our other friend and other co-host here, Zach.
That would be strange because he is not here with us today. It's just Nick and I. Sorry, Zach had some business he had to take care of today, so we'll be holding down the fort. We've got a couple fun topics that we're going to be talking about today. Oh, yeah. We're getting in the weeds a little bit on some more complex stuff. We're going to be talking about copyright law, thanks to Disney finally losing their eternal war. With holding on to their intellectual properties forever. We're also going to be talking a little bit about networking. We're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity with our friend Mike Soroka and why you might be putting your congregation's information and data at risk if you're not being careful. So don't want to do that. Generally speaking, that's bad vibes for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Nick, how's your day going? How you feeling?
Doing pretty good. Good. We had a project through Blackbar Productions that we just posted, a project that we've been working on for a long time. I know that you had a lot to do with. There was a book that just was released yesterday through one of our clients that works with us.
And did it just come out yesterday? Did it?
I believe it was. Yep. Because I just posted about it on their social media that it's now available online. Good.
Well, once we get this book, we'll have to show it off. I'm pretty happy with it.
It is
that one. It's worth talking about.
So dang good, man. It turned out real nice.
Yeah, pretty happy with it.
But, yeah.
So why don't we get into our first topic of the day today? Where, to my understanding, Nick. Mm-hmm. I can just post any sort of thing I want that Disney's ever made now, and I can do it legally and free.
So there's certain parts of that sentence that are true and certain parts of that sentence that are not. Legally and free, and anything that Disney has made, all that's not true. So,
okay.
Yeah. What you're referring to, though, is the fact that Disney, the copyright ran out for Disney's Steamboat Willie, which is a version of Mickey Mouse that was from I think the 1920s, maybe. I'm trying to pull. It's probably on the article in front of me, but it's either 1920s, 1940s, somewhere in there. And
it's not any version of Mickey Mouse. It's just one particular version of Mickey Mouse.
It's this one specific version. Mm-hmm. And if you try any other version thinking that you're going to get away with it, you're probably going to get a cease and desist letter. I would even go as far as say that Disney might, depends on your opinion of Disney, but Disney might just send out some cease and desist for anything that looks like it has a little bit of gray area.
We're having some weird transition effects. Sorry about that today. You don't mess with the mouse. There's a couple of companies that's just not worth it, and Disney is certainly one of them.
Right. Yeah, no, it's only the specific version of Mickey Mouse, the Steamboat Willie, and you can get a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I've seen people have certainly been taking advantage of this. I've seen scrolling through TikTok and YouTube and whatever else, plenty of Steamboat Willie merch now, whether that be shirts or coffee mugs or whatever, usually doing things that Disney may not necessarily appreciate, just sort of going wild with the fact that if you don't know, Disney has been a huge force in the copyright world of sort of extending the length of making sure that they can hold on to their intellectual properties for as long as humanly possible. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. The goods and bad sides to all that, but they can't hold on to it forever, and they lost this one. And we thought it was sort of worth bringing up because copyright law in general is something that is often misunderstood in many areas of ministry, many areres.
Ooh, are we getting a guest appearance?
Apparently. But especially in the church world, it is incredibly misunderstood. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think about like even, when you think about music, right? The music that we play in churches. If you're not aware, there are legal ramifications for not reporting what songs you're using. I'm not a worship leader, and so my knowledge in this area is fairly limited. But that's something I do know, is that by playing certain songs, you have to report, because those rights, the rights to play that music, does not belong to you. And certain packages of how you play the music can depend on if you are able to get the rights to it.
Right. Right. There are, so we wanted to talk specifically because generally speaking, I'm not going to say this is everybody, but generally speaking, churches have a relatively cavalier attitude when it comes to copyright law, right? And we've seen other churches get away with posting, either whether it be giant clips of movies or playing whatever song they want in the background of a video, or yada yada yada, and certainly there are
streaming the Super Bowl.
Streaming the
is
Super Bowl
certainly not
right
allowed.
There are CCLI is an easy way of handling things within the Christian world, and most churches already bought into that. But kind of outside of the Christian world, it gets more complicated. So we wanted to talk a little bit about why you should care about this kind of stuff as a church, and how you can protect yourself. And I didn't have the time to make it, but I wanted to put a giant flashing thing on the screen today that says, "We're not lawyers. This is not legal advice. Go talk to your lawyer."
You beat me to it, Caleb. I was going to be like, "Hey, we're not. This is not legal advice."
Right. Yeah, but it's something you should be aware of. I think something usually, and especially for small churches, that they sort of take advantage of the fact that obviously they're a small church. Like if they use something from Disney or whatever, what are they going to care? And chances are, likely they're not going to find it, let alone come and litigate. However, something to keep in mind, even for the smallest of churches, when you break IP law and everything, or if I own, let's say, like Blackbar, we technically own the intellectual property of Blackbar, right? And then somebody starts using the name of Blackbar, and it's a super small, and it's an unrelated thing or whatever, and they use our logo and whatnot, and we decide not to press charges or not to sort of chase that. And then years later, there's another church media marketing agency that shows up, and they use our name and our logo and our likeness or whatever to start marketing themselves. And we chase them in this very strange hypothetical alternate dimension where this is happening. In the court proceedings, the defense on their side can bring up the fact that we were not consistently applying our copyright ownership and defense of our own copyright across every area in which we showed up that we were made aware of. They can say, because you were not pursuing at them and you're pursuing on us, you're being especially sort of vindictive on this sort of case, and they can use that defense. So that means that large corporations who have the legal budget to chase people, Disney obviously being one of them, will absolutely, just to make sure that they have sort of the baseline to be able to chase and take down the big people who are making money off of their IP or whatever, they absolutely will just hunt down people who are using their intellectual property unfairly. So you absolutely should care about it, whether you're a big church, small church, especially if you're using widely known big intellectual property from organizations and companies that tend to be a little bit litigious.
Sure. And, I know churches tend to be, I think I'll use the word scrappy. Sometimes we make stuff happen out of very little things, right? We don't always have the budget or the capacity of larger organizations. And so we we make do with what we have. But there's another element to this of if we are trying to be a light in the darkness, right? There's certainly an argument to be made about trying to do things the right way, trying to do things the legal way,
not just what you can get away with.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Oh yeah. And But on that note, Caleb, I think we had talked earlier too that there are certain things that nonprofits do have a little bit of gray area they can operate in.
Yes. And I know even Corden mentioned in the comments here that, so technically speaking, churches are given the right to have a Super Bowl party, but the word Super Bowl specifically is copyrighted, and you're not allowed to promote it as a Super Bowl party. There are also rules specifically around even showing like movies and whatnot. You can get permission to show a movie, and there's a big list. I forget where this list is available.
It's on the CCLI website.
Sure. I remember being back working in the marketing department at University of Valley Forge, and we would have movie nights for the college. And I remember one time we were showing The Dark Knight, some Batman movie, and we had to advertise the fact that we were having a movie night. And we wanted to tell people what the movie was, but we legally could not. So I remember saying, hey, it's movie night. And then they were like, bats on the slide for some reason, right?
Yeah.
And like, we could hint at it, but we could not explicitly say what the movie was. So there are some interesting rules around that specifically. But I think even past the sort of like giant IPs and whatnot, Disney, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. There's something to be said, even as like a graphic designer or video animator, whatever, and you're going out and looking for resources online, and you're going on Google, scrolling through Google Images, and you're just finding something you like to throw on your pastor slide to use as the background for something. If you're not careful about that, that can also be breaking copyright law. Are you less likely to get prosecuted for that kind of stuff? Obviously, absolutely. Sure. But I do think, just like you were saying earlier, Nick, like if there's anybody that should be having like a relatively moral like stance on this kind of thing, and doing things right and properly, and not stealing the intellectual property from other creators more than likely in the field, I feel like church creatives should kind of be on that bad way. I feel like the attitude of what can we get away with should probably not be the direction that most of us are leaning. At least I would hope.
Yeah. We also have a question from Gareth. I don't know if you want to take this question now or leave it for the blackout segment later. But he mentioned, like, how can you play Christian music on a YouTube video on your live stream?
Maybe that is a question. So at
for
the very
blackout.
End, as you ask questions today, we will have a section at the very end of the podcast that we're calling Blackout, that we started last podcast, and we'll be answering all of those questions there, because that is a bit of a larger question, especially if you get outside of the world of CC. Well, there's CCLI, and then there's stuff past that. I'm not going to go any further, but stick around. We will answer that question. The other big part that I wanted to talk about today is the general legal doctrine of fair use, because that is sort of when we get into churches actually using intellectual property owned by other companies. This is the conversation that's going to come up, and this conversation comes up all the time on like social media, in the world of YouTube, in content creation in general, of when is it actually legal to use somebody else's copyrighted material, because there are actually rules for this, and you can get away with doing it. I would say, generally speaking, the safest route, don't. That's the safe, like, if you want to be the most protected and never have to worry about it, don't do it. But there are legal and safe ways to do it. The problem is the line is not sharp. It's very gray, and it's very like up to argument. And chances are you don't want to be spending tithe money on legally defending yourself. But I want to talk over the four things, because it does allow us to use IP in sort of creative, interesting ways for sermon illustrations or storytelling or whatever. And fair use, which is the doctrine of how the legal system allows companies to decide, or allows companies to use intellectual property owned by other people. There are four sort of like standards, the four factors, I believe they're called, at which it's sort of decided whether or not your use of that IP was fair or not. And the four are the purpose and character of the use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion taken, and the effect and use on the potential market for the value of the copyrighted work. That's the legal
That sounds
side.
complicated.
Yeah, it is. Just going through it one by one and keeping it simple. These are litmus tests you could use to see if you are like being safe with the work that you do decide to use. Number one is the purpose and character of the use, and this is specifically talking about the original use case. So we could use Mickey Mouse as an example.
Sure, I think this is a good way. Yeah.
Right. Mickey Mouse was intended originally, he was sort of a creative character brought up for commercial purposes for the most part, right? It was a character brought up to put on TV, right? Probably TV at the time, and to or was it just movies? It might have been. I don't know.
It probably was just movies at that point. If we're talking the 30s, yeah.
Right. To make money. Right. This would be opposed to something like creating a textbook for the purpose of education, right? Versus something that was more just creative, inspired or whatever. And the law has sort of like different amount of leniency or standards for different types of things. So like, for example, if we were doing our educational podcast here and we just pull up a giant textbook about, video production and I hold it up to the screen and read it word for word, that would probably not fall under the umbrella of fair use. Because I'm literally just taking the entire thing that is built for education and using it for education, but for free. And without permission, that would not be appropriate. As well as in the same way, if Mickey Mouse, who is built to be a commercial product, if I then take Mickey Mouse's likeness, put it on a t-shirt and start selling it for a commercial sort of industry or whatever, that would also not be incredibly appropriate. However, if I'm using Mickey Mouse to talk about something that's more educational, right, where it's not necessarily the same use case across both fronts, now there's more of a conversation. I'm not saying it's now all of a sudden, whitelist, you're good, you can do whatever you want.
Sure.
But there, you now lean in the direction of being maybe a bit more fair use. I'll also mention in general, again, this is not a black and white thing, but in general, specifically, nonprofits get more leniency in this regard to using IP material than for-profit companies. So we do have a small leg up if you're a church doing this sort of thing, which is something I didn't know. I found that out when I was researching that this week. So
that's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah. The next bit is the nature of the copyrighted work. This is now talking a bit more about whether this is sort of the creative. Sorry, I've actually mixed up these two a little bit. The very first one was the purpose and character of how we're using it. The second one is the nature of the copyright, how it was sort of intended to be used. So all the points that I was kind of crossing back and forth between these two a little bit. My apologies. It's also worth noting that generally creative works are more protected. So movies, we're talking about music, we're talking about art. The original artist usually has a bit more protection in this sort of scope, which unfortunately tends to be more of what churches want to be using, is things that I would generally fall under the category of creative.
That makes sense. Yeah.
The third topic, or the third pillar, is the amount and substantiality of the portion taken. I'm sure we've all been to a sermon before in which they're playing a 30-second clip of some movie, probably Facing the Giants. If you grew up,
I don't know why, but that's where my mind went to.
Right? Yeah, right. I need 10 more.
That's exactly the clip I was thinking.
Right.
Oh my God.
We've all been to a sermon where we've heard that, and then the altar calls right after. The keyboard player snuck up during that, and immediately afterwards, if they're really talented, they started hitting a chord that was in the same key as the inspirational music that was playing after, right? And then they started ripping right after that. And generally speaking, 30 seconds of a clip over the course of a 45-minute sermon, the amount of IP material in that is relatively small. However, if you were to play the entirety of Facing the Giants and then preached about it for 3 minutes, now the overwhelming majority of that new piece or content or whatever that you made is majority IP material that was not transformative. It wasn't anything that you changed or edited, and that is it's not going to be great. That's not going to look good. So generally, if you're going to be using intellectual property, be using the most minimal amount of it as you can to make your point, whatever that might be. And then the sort of last pillar to be talking about is the effect of the use on the potential market for the value of the copyrighted work. So if you were to, we could use Mickey Mouse as an example again, and
Sure.
I'm going to make a bunch of Disney Mickey Mouse merch and put Mickey Mouse on t-shirts or whatever, and I'm selling it on Amazon and yada, yada, yada. And I'm selling it for a relatively inexpensive price, and a bunch of people are buying it. Now, a bunch of people who were fans of Disney and were fans of Mickey Mouse bought my product instead of buying Disney's product. And I have very directly affected the value of the market for that original product, and Disney would sue my pants off for doing that kind of thing. So if you are,
all the money that you
sold, all that and more, and probably damages and whatnot. So I mean, if you're doing like just showing a clip of a movie or something in your sermon, generally speaking, I don't think that's going to be affecting the value of the original IP or anything. But there's certainly, like, arguments have been made about, like, even people doing like clips and synopses on YouTube and saying like, okay, now I don't need to watch the entire movie. You explained it to me.
React channels, stuff like that.
Yeah. Don't start a church React channel. React channels are cringe anyway. And then just a more general thing to be thinking about is a word that comes up a lot in this sort of space is transformative, and then parody comes on top of this as well. So when we talk about something that is transformative is I'm taking sort of intellectual property work or whatever, and I'm adjusting it and I'm changing it and I'm making something new out of it. This isn't just taking Mickey Mouse's likeness and putting it on a t-shirt. It's taking things about Mickey Mouse and the character, whatever, and then making my own character that maybe looks kind of like it, but it's not quite like it. And it's all pixels that I made. It's all work that I did. And even though it has some amount of relation to it, I generally can be protected, making something new and transformative and different and whatever out of the thing. And then along that same lines, parody is extremely protected in the United States specifically. So I remember even a number of years ago, back when we were both working at Grand Rapids First, we had a Christmas series that we did that was 100% just a parody of Hallmark in its entirety. We had fancy greeting cards that we're using as invites for everybody. Our staff made funny, stupid, like Hallmark movies,
the Hallmark
parodies. It was ridiculous. But the whole thing was called Hallelujah, and it all had this very much tongue-in-cheek Christian spin to it. And I managed to find literally like close to the exact font as the Hallmark logo, but it was saying Hallelujah instead. And we were being very intentionally tongue-in-cheek, funny parody with it. Everybody knew we were referencing Hallmark. Nobody thought that it was a Hallmark event, that this was actually Hallmark's product, right? We were making a joke of it. And that is really, when you're talking about parody and sort of modifying, changing things on that end, as if you could think about the litmus test is, could anybody be convinced that this is actually from the thing that you're parodying? Then you have not done enough to transform the work. So generally speaking, if you follow those guidelines, if you're transformative or use parody, if you are using the original copyrighted work for not the original purpose that it was sort of intended to be used for, if you're using the minimal amount as possible that you need to sort of get across your point, and whatever it is that you're making or doing with that does not affect the value of the original work, you should be okay-ish. But if you want to be safe, don't touch it.
Yep, just don't touch it. And we're not, this isn't illegal advice. We're not lawyers. But Caleb, you're right. I think a lot of that transformative stuff, like, I think that's where a lot of people get into trouble, is it's not transformative enough when they do something. I even think of this will make you roll your eyes, but you remember in the early 2000s when they had like instead of Intel inside, it was Jesus inside T-shirts that they
Yes.
made. That whole
Yes.
line of like just take a logo and try to make it Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I will specifically call out my beloved, whom I love to death, cousin Aaron. You know who you are. That literally his entire wardrobe for all of middle school and high school was exclusively like it's the Heinz logo, right?
Yeah.
But it says Jesus or Sprite or whatever, and it says Savior.
It's like Spirit.
Literally, it was his whole thing. The whole for all 4 or 5. I'm not sure how we didn't get bullied into the earth. With kind of, if that's your form of evangelism, great. It's certainly it's
a conversation starter, Caleb.
Yeah, but those obviously, I mean, I'm sure you could still buy those things. Whether or not you should is a different conversation. But those are very much thoroughly falling under the category of parody, right? Nobody thinks that is a shirt designed by Heinz or designed by Sprite. We're just sort of taking a culturally relevant thing and making like a really poor excuse for a sermon with it instead. So. My opinion's been made.
Clearly.
Have you done any questionable things in the world of copyright, Nick, that you'd like to confess to the world?
I'm checking our chat. I'm like, was that a question someone asked?
No, I'm just curious. I'm just curious if you have.
I don't think so. I know of a case of someone I know that may have accidentally done something about that. But it wasn't me.
Permission to talk about it. So yeah. I remember being very young. Well, I mean, probably in mid high school at the time, and the church that I was attending at the time asked me to create something for their Christmas service, and I used the entirety of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra "Carol of the Bells" because. That was the vibe at the time, and clips from I think the Passion and everything to create the most ridiculous video compilation I possibly could have. Sure. And all I can think about now is like that thing was the definition of not fair use. I didn't get permission for anything. I was just shooting from the hip and making something I thought was cool. One of the worst things I've ever created, no question, and it has been burned from the internet. And you'll never find it. But it's. Everybody makes stupid mistakes early on. Unfortunately, I just had a platform to throw it on at the time.
Sure.
Which,
Yeah, now you're talking about that. I don't think it was me, but I do recall there being a lot of opportunities where people wanted media, and like the go-to thing was to find some version of clips from the Passion of the Christ. And you would always throw that into like I remember watching YouTube videos where people would take someone else's music and then throw clips from the Passion behind it. And then they'd upload it to YouTube and be like, hey guys, check out this thing I made. So it's kind of like two things there where you're taking someone else's music, someone else's video and presenting it as your own.
Right.
And certainly that possibly could have lived in one of those gray areas, but I would not want to try to navigate that now.
Is Passion of the Christ on CCLI?
It probably is. I bet you. I would be really surprised if it wasn't. It's probably one of the few R-rated movies that is. But
interesting.
We got a comment that's probably worth talking about here. Johnny Yepes in our comments mentioned about one of the sermon series they did at his church called Wisdom for Dummies, which if I remember
remember that.
And if I remember, I think Johnny made this really great animation for it, which turned out really cool because they used like the logo has like usually like a character, some sort of like stick figure character. Well, they took that character and transformed it into an image of their lead pastor.
There you go.
And so perhaps that's where the transformative portion was in there.
Sure.
But
Johnny, it's definitely it's close, and it's all gray area. It's all all the whole conversation of fair use it's not black and white. It does need to be argued, which is why generally speaking, it's better to play it safe. Just make your own material, But there is a time and a place for it if you're doing it right. If you are being careful. So we just wanted to talk about it. Again, we're not legal experts. This is not legal advice, but a general 10,000 foot view. Hopefully you're a little bit more educated understanding on this world than you were previously.
Nice.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Wanted to get into our second topic today. It's very different from that, but also extremely in the weeds and also pre-recorded.
Yes.
So we brought on our good friend Mike Soroka on last night, actually, to talk specifically about the world of cybersecurity, about the world of networking and everything. And if this is not something that you've touched before or had to think about before, you should be thinking about before. Mike does a really great job of helping you understand why this is important, not just for the IT professionals at your church, because most churches don't have IT professionals, but you as a pastor and even you as a creative, why your wireless NDI or your wireless lights or literally anything you have in the network is not safe unless you're careful about it.
That was one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation, was just the fact of how vulnerable things like that can be. And it's not something that was just like, was clear, like, oh, of course this could be vulnerable. But we'll let Mike talk more about it.
Yeah, we'll see you back in a little while. Enjoy old us. Hello, everyone. We're here from the past, and Zach looks a lot different. Sorry about that. This is a good friend, Mike Soroka. In the world of networking and cybersecurity, you're the guy, is what I've been told. My friends have all told me you're the guy. Is that correct?
Depends. Yeah.
You're amongst the guys, at least.
Yes.
And you've been doing this for a minute.
Yeah. Probably about 5 years or so. Yeah.
Wonderful.
But before that, obviously, I was a tinkerer, and and did things that could get you in a little trouble or whatever. So.
I'm seeing a box in the background that might get some people in trouble if they are not as,
if they don't know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, laws. Right.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I think we'll talk about a couple other toys like that a little bit later.
Oh boy.
We actually, so you and I have been talking a lot recently because the Blackbar has sort of a server set up it's a home server for the most part, but we host a lot of our files on there and storage for clients that we work with. You can call us up at BOK.BAR. And I was managing it very much as an amateur, and I had a question about my router, and I texted you my question, and you were very gracefully able to inform me that I was doing a lot of things very incorrectly, and exposing my public IP and all of the ports that I had open to the whole world, not just to my server, but to theoretically my entire home network. And you were able to help me understand an affordable option with Ubiquity, which I'm a big fan of Ubiquity now, to be able to solve that. And I very much appreciate that. But we got to talking afterwards about the fact that, I'm, relatively speaking, a tech savvy guy. And there's a lot of people working in churches, a lot of churches who don't have hugely tech savvy guys, and even some that don't, and are dealing with hundreds of people, potentially thousands, some even tens of thousands of people walking in every single week. And there are arguably things that churches should be aware of in the world of cybersecurity that I don't think most churches have a person that's focused on that kind of thing. I think in the same world as like media production or communications or even a tech guy, I know you've served as a tech guy as well at a church, that's usually like the youngest guy in the room that has proven that they know how to work like PowerPoint, right? And this also can fall into those categories, especially in smaller churches. So I think what I would love to talk to you about today, sort of starting off, is cybersecurity can sound, and networking in general can sound really, really boring. Why on earth should anybody care about it? Tell us some horror stories on why people should care about this world.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is a lot of people don't realize how many people are actually on the internet, like at any given moment. I just looked up. I saw an article. Just it was from this month of this year. Just saying that currently there's 5.35 billion people that are like connected to the internet at all times.
Most of the world, I think.
66% it says. Yeah.
The pop. That number sounds so familiar to when we did the population of China, talking about like nations online and stuff. That's a lot. That's an entire nation of people.
Well, that's most of the nations of people. Yeah.
Yeah, and of that, over 5 billion of them are actually on social media. So I feel like that alone, churches are reaching people on social media now. That's like where people are at, and that's where they try to get the word out. With that said, you're on the internet. There's people out there that want to get your data, do things that aren't good, like
sure.
So with churches, with them streaming, with all of these things are how we manage our finances, how we we send out e-blasts, we again, social media, a creative side, people using Adobe products, a lot of that stuff is cloud based, and all that stuff is on the internet, and we access it every single day. Churches access it every single day. And there's, do you leave your house and make sure you lock the door when you leave? Do you lock your, the door, your car when you leave in a parking lot? It's the same thing as these accounts and whatnot. Is the reason why you lock it is to keep the bad guy out. So,
right, sure. So, to my understanding, most of your experience in the world of cybersecurity is specifically Team Blue, which is defensive side. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. Yep.
Right.
A lot of the stuff that I actually
there's Team
different
Red
teams.
There are Mike, you tell me if I'm wrong, but Team Blue is keeping people out of the house, and Team Red is sort of a white hat hacker of like you're hiring someone to see if they can break in and exploit whatever
white hat
problems that you have.
Term. I've heard that before.
Right? Am I correct in those definitions, Mike?
Yeah, and they have tournaments of capture the flag, and
right.
Yeah. Yep.
What?
So why, like, I know obviously you've been on Team Blue, which is great. Thank you for being on Team Blue. But if I was like a Team Red, or maybe like a malicious Team Red sort of deal, why would, like, if I'm thinking of a place to hack into, churches typically, I would think, would not be near the top of the list. Why would a church necessarily be a target for someone who is interested in getting a hold of juicy data? What data could they have?
Yeah, well, first off, yes, big corporations and stuff are usually the target, right? Governments. But they are sending out, whether it's a phishing email or whatever, they're sending out stuff all the time and just waiting for someone to bite. Right. So that's happening all the time, just all the time. And churches, if you really think about it, how much cash flow goes through churches? It's quite a bit. And before, people would donate and tithe in checks and cash. Well, how many churches now are doing that digitally? Because that's just how
post 2020,
right?
most everyone has some sort of online giving program.
Yeah. And because of that, they can. Financial stuff is usually the biggest thing that they want. They want money. So if you're if you're a decent sized church, you could easily be targeted to be hacked in certain ways, whether it's ransomware or just trying to get the account data, trying to get information on the congregation.
Mike, you used the term there, ransomware. What is ransomware?
That is when they get access to your data and they encrypt it. And the only way to get that data back is to have the keys to the encryption, and they want to you to pay for it.
So what you're telling me is it sounds like someone who's hacking might grab like access to your website and all the information on your website, right? And they're basically holding them ransom. I guess that's why it's called ransomware.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would imagine the website might be the least of your worries of what they could. I know, Mike, you and I were talking before about like these church management softwares like Breeze, Fellowship One. I think even Planning Center has their own version of it now, where these churches, they have names, they have addresses, often the ages of the entire family, like all of that data. So it's not just the church or the church staff or the church resources. It is the members of your congregation's information and data that you have on your own systems, even if you're using a CMS or whatever, that it's not going to take too much. And like usually we think of hackers, right, as like black screen, green text, just typing a bunch of code and blowing up your mainframe or whatever. But most of the time it's an admin getting tricked into typing their username and password or something that is absolutely not the site that they thought it was, or someone just walking in, having conversation, social engineering a code out of someone or whatever.
Yeah, and then especially how many churches are using like Office products, Office 365. That's a lot of times where they're storing their files from their Office and where they're using for sending emails. That alone puts them in the same spot as any type of business.
And I know we also had a brief conversation before about, because I know we have obviously a bunch of creatives listening, especially on the tech side, that there's a lot of technology in the production world, whether that be like wireless video protocol or lighting or whatever, that if you're not careful about how you set up your network, is theoretically just open to anybody who goes looking for it, who connects to your Wi-Fi. Am I right?
Yeah. If you don't have proper segmentation on your network, where that's pretty much you're identifying traffic and you're making sure that it can, one device on it can't talk to the other. How many? They don't put money into these management ports, for logging in to your PA system, to adjust EQs and crossovers and whatnot. They're not looking at it that way. They're looking at a convenience way of being able to get in there and adjust your system or adjust the frequencies on your wireless miking system. So they have a username and password, right? But they don't have any more than that. And usually most places are going to leave it at the default username and password.
Yep.
And there's master lists. People don't realize that you can just Google and it will tell you the factory username and password of like millions and millions of companies and devices. So
what you're saying, it sounds like if something's on a Wi-Fi network, it sounds like it's pretty vulnerable, could be very vulnerable to these attacks
if not properly set up. Yep.
So let me get this straight. I think I heard you say like lighting and stuff. So like I know some churches will use their do video over NDI, right? If saying what you're saying not properly set up, let's say factory default, someone's using NDI to run video, is it possible someone could like hack into that and send their own rogue signal through NDI?
Yep.
That's not good. That's awful.
That's not good at all.
I'm thinking of, what was it, the Max Headroom thing that happened where they hacked into that TV station and they had that whole whole thing.
Yeah,
so you could
basically
that
at your church.
That's not great.
That wouldn't be great. And the tools for I know this of my own hobbyist looking into this sort of world, and I know we alluded to a couple devices earlier, the tools for causing problems in this sort of the world are getting more and more accessible and more inexpensive. Even like, so I know I mentioned the little box sitting behind you right there, called a Wi-Fi pineapple. I mean, you can buy that. I think it's like $150, something like that. And that's sort of an all-in-one Wi-Fi hacking tool. I was able to, with the one that I have set up here, I was able to pick up Wi-Fi networks and like properly identify them and access them from nearly like a little over a quarter mile away, I would say. Like the antennas on that, and then to be able to scrape traffic off of that. So even if you don't know what sort of is open or available, you could just set up and listen and just hear what is happening on a Wi-Fi network. And who knows?
That raises another question for me, and Mike, maybe you can help answer this. That seems to give you an amount of control and access that is a little terrifying with what you call it, the pineapple. Okay, so how is this legal?
So a lot of the tools that are used maliciously are tools that are original was for monitoring and for like in a utility standpoint, which is why usually people that are doing network security, they have to learn how a hacker does things. So in essence, that's where you get the one team and the other team is that they know the same thing because they're trying to prevent each other. One's supposed to trying to get in, one's trying to prevent that person from getting in. And that's where a lot of those tools are designed, and they go both ways.
Right. I think my very favorite example and my favorite personal toy in the space is this wonderful little device. It was making headlines just about everywhere about a year ago.
Yeah, it kind of went viral. Yeah,
it certainly did, and that's what I bought mine. To be honest, I saw some stupid high schooler turn off his projector in the middle of class, like, oh, I gotta have that, whatever that is. But it's called a Flipper Zero, and it's just sort of like an all-in-one hacking tool, and it's got a bunch of stuff that you could do Wi-Fi hacking in here. It's got bad USB in here. It's got like sub-gigahertz stuff. It can do RFID. It can do a bunch of different things. And even with just this tool and a little bit of Googling around, I was able to edit a script that would run anytime that I plugged this into a computer. It's got a little USB dongle. And I ran it on my dad. And I told him I ran it on him afterwards. So I'm not doing anything too bad. But like I plugged it into his computer and I ran the script, and it took about 15 seconds to run. It didn't require any touch. It essentially emulates a keyboard and then just starts typing code as fast as the computer can handle it. And I was able to scrape every single saved password that he had on Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Microsoft Edge, and I think it was Opera, and it would grab all that, save that into a little zip file, and then upload it to a remote server. And then I unplug it, and there's no evidence that I was ever there, right? And it was just that fast. And this little thing you can get for like 150, 160 bucks. There are bad USBs that are way cheaper than that. I know we talked about that a little bit beforehand. Yeah. This does a bunch of stuff. This is a multi-tool. You can build a bad USB for probably 20, 30 bucks. If you know what you're doing. Like, it's so easy to do this stuff now.
Yeah, and especially with a bad USB, right? So you plug it in, you can make it act just like a normal USB. So the person does not know whatsoever, and it runs a script, which would be like a small, like, software-ish, a command, and it would run, and it would, whatever you ask it to do, if you don't have the proper things in place, it would then send that data out on that same person's computer, and they're copying pictures or a video or whatever, and it works the same. And what happens is then as soon as they hand it to someone else to be like, hey man, I copied these videos for you, and then they give it to the other person, it's going to do the same thing. And it's how long do you usually hold on to a USB? probably quite
Right.
quite you know,
Too
now
long.
that they're good. I feel like
Right.
back in the day when we were slow and everything, you were always waiting
Yeah.
for the latest greatest, but now
Yeah.
it's like I have USBs that are like 8 years old, you know, and I'm still using them. But
Right.
if it was a bad USB, how many people have I shared that with? Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Mike, you kind of explained this a little bit, but I'm going to press a little bit farther here. You talked about bad USB. I'm taking that means exactly it's a USB that does bad things.
Yes. So it's the size he's holding up right there. It's the size of a USB. They make them look like I have one right here that actually looks just like a generic. People have probably seen these. They have like the little metal hinge, literally nothing, nothing otherwise. But then when you open it up, it actually has a mini computer in there, and you actually put a trying to get it over. You put a SD card in there, and it runs whatever script that you put on that SD card.
It's terrifying. It's
So like
they also make them now. The company that makes, if I believe, the company that makes that also makes them now in the form factor of a iPhone Lightning like cable.
I've heard
So
of that.
it looks just like a normal iPhone charging cable, and it will do the exact same thing. To my understanding, on either side, it could punch in the script to the phone, or it can do it to the computer. That's insane
terrifying.
Yeah,
you can't
especially
trust anything.
Especially that same cable. What people don't realize is that same cable that he's talking about can create its own Wi-Fi. So the attacker could. This actually happens in the airports all the time. Is that they plug it in, they charge their phone, they plug it in, and that be a mile away because it creates, you know, a connection back over the Wi-Fi to their device, and then they can remotely do it, and no one would know anything other. So
now
So
I know this because Caleb has told me never to have my Wi-Fi on in an airport. I'm taking a guess that's part of the reason.
Yes. I don't trust any of them.
Yeah, and what's nice though is they actually sell these little adapters that you can actually plug onto a USB that it just allows the power. Because you know, a USB cable, you know, the new Type C's might have like 20 something pins in it, and every one of them, some of them send data, some of them send video, and then there's like a handful that is just for power. And you can add these little adapters onto it. You know, you can keep it in your purse or whatever, in your pocket or whatever. And you add it to the end, and then it just allows power, and then that way you can guarantee that whether if it was malicious, it's fine.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I think even with something like this, obviously I'm not. Maybe it's not obvious. I'm not running around and hacking my neighbors and random people at the mall. Like that's not something I'm doing. But I can tell you, just having this and realizing what is possible with a little consumer $150 device has completely changed the way that I do interact with the online world and the way that I use my devices and what Wi-Fi I'm willing to connect to and what I'm not, and the kind of wallet that I bring. Like it's just being aware of how easy it is to exploit other people's like lack of security. Makes me just like all the more careful about like like using password managers and yada yada yada. So we could probably spend 4 hours talking about all the fun stories of ways that we can exploit people's lack of security. I'm curious to make this a productive, helpful talk for everybody that might be a little nervous,
not just scare
them. Right. What are some like easy practical for people who have never thought they're using the same password for everything that they've opened up since they were 13 years old? What are some like super easy first steps that anybody could take, specifically in the church, world, whether it be pastor, creative production, whatever, to protect the church, yourself, the people around you? What are some easy steps people can take?
The biggest one I would say is you need to assess what accounts you have, especially in a church. Obviously, there's multiple roles depending on the size of the church, and knowing what accounts are attached to church accounts.
Sure.
Whether it is in production or in the office for financial, for church management software. Knowing what you have, because you can't lock it down. You can't make sure that it's has unique passwords that don't relate to anything to the church or the people that are actually using those accounts. you gotta know it first, right? So having that and documenting it is the number one step. And then I would say the next is to have a password manager. Unless I highly don't recommend, most people probably do still to this day, have an Excel document that has all their passwords in it, and it's called passwords.
Passwords. It's on your
and
desktop.
It's on
right?
the desktop or your documents.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you have a password on that Excel document, it can be easily broken very, very quick. So yeah, password manager, and adding all of those accounts, whatever they have for security on it, whether it's like multi-factor or some type of two-step, that is crucial. It's still not perfect, but it's like the best that we have right now. And a lot of company softwares are going that route. Even ones that I'm kind of shocked that they don't really have any like sensitive information, but it's just that's where the industry's going. Sure. And a lot of people are being pressured by governments and just different type of organizations to go that no matter what. Like that just become the norm. And unfortunately the church doesn't fall under any of that. So them knowing and having the understanding at least of how to go about protecting yourself is, I think it's really, really important.
And two-factor authentication, I imagine everybody has at least heard that before. And I know even like logging into Google's like, you should set up two-factor authentication. And no, I need to check my Gmail right now. Thank you. We'll do it at another time. Right. It literally, it takes, maybe a minute, if that. And then, every time you're logging in, you just pull up your little authenticator app on your phone or whatever device you set it up on. And it takes an extra 10 seconds. But the amount, I even think, not even church related at all, a good friend of mine and a good friend of Nick's, our friend Grant, got his entire Steam library completely stolen from him like 3 years ago. And that thing was worth more than 3 digits. And the speed at which I set up two-factor authentication immediately afterwards to make sure that never happened to me. It like basically it's you don't want to make that decision after you've lost it. Like now he has it set up, I guarantee you. But it's too late at that point. It's already been lost. And that is the wrong time to be making these sort of measures to protect yourself.
Yes. And yeah, it's the same thing with like the ransomware. I'm like, if your creative team has some type of storage where you have all of your church media, whether it's like videos or all the projects that you're working on, if they were to come in and encrypt all of that, unless you're going to pay out, which they never ask for a little bit of money. It's always way more than most people can afford. Then that data is gone. So there's no reversal for that.
I have certainly heard of like large companies who have been hit with ransomware and they just pay because they've really, there's no other option for the most part. It's not.
Yeah, that's actually where I got heavily into this is our company actually a handful of years ago got ransomware, and it was the longest 2 to 3 weeks of my life.
I believe it.
Bringing the whole company back up. So yeah,
good.
It was that's where we drastically practices, and this is where a lot of this that I'm doing now is from. So
sure. That makes sense. You lost your Steam library. You're making sure it doesn't happen again. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'm stitching together some points here. Like it's sounding like if someone does ransomware to a church, right, gets all their data, there's an absurd amount of money that's being held as the ransom. I mean, you either pay that or you lose it, right? And I can imagine like for some people it would be a really, really tough pill to swallow, where you have to tell your church, a sizable amount of people's giving is now just gone because they had to to pay.
It's not even that. It's either they like I dumped 100 grand into getting all of our data back, or it's not just like the hackers are holding on to it, like give me the money or I'll never give it back. It's give me the money or I'm going to make all of this public right now. And now all of like I'm gonna leak it onto the black market or whatever, and now all of a sudden all these people have now free and open access to everyone in your congregation's home addresses and every single one of their names and email address. It's not a good time.
I'm terrified for the pastor who has to stand up in front of a congregation and say we're having a special giving to pay the ransom. Pay the ransom. And you need to do it because it's your data.
We are all like, collectively being held ransom right now.
I know, right? Like I just think it screams the importance of this issue. Like, this is not just something you can sleep on. This is something that, Mike, I'm looking forward to some more of your some more advice to steer clear of this, because hopefully our audience can make use of it.
Yeah, and honestly, there is a lot of the things that you can do are free. So it's obviously size churches and obviously drastically different budgets between each.
Sure.
Password managers, not all of them, most of them are free. They have free like user account that do 90% of what the person wants. That has multi-factor on the main account, so that way that's locked down. You can do all your passwords in there, and they integrate with a lot of the different services. So that can be free. The paid ones, honestly, I don't really feel like what you get is worth it. So I always tell people just to go with the free account. Unless you're a huge organization, that's where the features come into play.
Sure.
Biggest thing is what people don't realize is taking administrative rights from a single desktop, whether it's Mac or not. They all with the main account is the full administrative account. You have full access to do anything on that actual computer. So if someone does not have full access to it and someone does on accident stick a bad USB into there, it would prevent majority of what it can do. But that's in case that boils down to if that person is smart and actually does that. That's free.
Yeah. So how can you prevent a bad USB attack? Can we start there?
Put in rogue USB sticks.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's different ways. A lot of if we're talking about corporate, a lot of corporate, they actually turn off the USBs, and people hate it.
Wow.
But most people don't need it. Now, obviously, if you're sharing files, they usually recommend actually sharing files digitally. So if you have like a OneDrive or use I don't know what Google's version of Google Docs, they want you to share in that environment, because that way you can say, hey, this person can only have this document that I'm sending. It won't work under anyone else. So that's a way to prevent leakage of data in that sense, and prevent people that shouldn't be having access to it to get access to it. Obviously, if you use a thumb drive and you lose it and you're like, oh my goodness, like anyone, there was financial information on that or whatever, you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other things. The admin rights is the biggest thing, because if you don't have admin rights, you can restrict. And some people think they're like, oh, if I don't have admin rights, that prevents my daily use on it. No, like you browsing, you doing mail, stuff like that, watching videos, whatever task is, does not need administrative rights. It's mainly like installing software and running certain commands, which the bad USB would try to fire off, but if you don't have it, it just doesn't work. So
and if you know the username and password to the admin account, whenever those things happen, you could just type them in. It takes an extra second and you're still secure, because you're not logged in with an account that has it by default.
Right. And you even can have it like on Windows. Windows is, updates galore, right? There's updates all the time. if you don't have admin rights, it's still, if you have auto updating on, it still works in the background. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's not like you're going to constantly have to use it. People aren't realize they could go 6 months without ever having to
Sure.
type in that admin username and password. So if you have something that is trying to keylog, which is, actually trying to, it uses what you push on the keyboard and it's logging all those keystrokes. If you're not using your admin username and password, besides maybe a couple times in a year, that limits that. If that was happening, the worst thing they could do is get your username and password. So
right. So again, just like the first time, I think we could go on and on and on about all the different things. I do want to ask sort of a last thing. If someone is interested in taking more steps in this direction, and they throw on their password manager and they rip admin rights off of everything and they store it in a metal safe or something, are there resources or directions or things that you'd point them online of, like, they want to learn more about it, they're excited about it, they want to figure it out? Where would you point someone? What direction would you point them of someone who's interested in this world of cybersecurity?
Oh man, there's so many resources.
I know.
Honestly, YouTube is like a huge resource. Because what people don't realize is, like, a lot of actual professional, like, companies and organizations that actually do this for a living. They have a presence on there. Like, we use tons and tons of Cisco products for security and our networking and our wireless, all of that. They have so much resources on YouTube. All their videos and everything are all through there. One of the biggest things I would say is there is a government agency called CISA. It's an acronym for, like, Cybersecurity Institution of something of America. CISA.gov.
Okay.
And
Nice.
They in real time publish all vulnerabilities that they are aware of on products. And they also have like just general practice, good hygiene on security and stuff. They have, it's a great source, and it's government. So it's I check that all the time. I actually have like a RSS feed that actually sends me information if there's any new exploits or potential things that are happening around. So
yeah, that's super cool. Like with most things in the world, the tech world at least, YouTube seems to reign supreme of learning.
YouTube and Google are most IT people's friends. So
yes, most definitely. Cool. Well,
Mike,
thank you so
me.
Go ahead.
I'm probably, I was just gonna say, Mike, you've convinced me. I'm gonna have to immediately after this conversation, I'm gonna be updating all my passwords and making sure two-factor is turned on. It should be.
I've been getting on you about passwords for a while, so I'm glad that we're finally here. Mike, thank you very much for coming on and talking about this. This probably won't be the last time. Next time there's a huge, big security blow up at a church, we're gonna have you on, just talk about everything they did wrong. Just so everybody can learn.
There you go.
Their mistakes. So yeah, Mike, appreciate having you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Like that whole conversation. I'm so glad it was yesterday, because I've already done so much between then and now to try to cover up some of the holes in my own cybersecurity.
I was going to ask you if you actually did go and take the advice and start making changes. It sounds like you have.
Yeah. Yes, indeed, I have actually. We've been talking about. I know the comments were talking about different types of password managers and stuff like that. It's just such a real thing. Like the problem is real, right? It's something that could really affect anyone. And I remember even as far back as like 2016, I was listening to a podcast where they talked about a woman who had ransomware on her computer, and she ended up having to like find a Bitcoin ATM, which is not as rare as it used to be, but like that was the only type of currency the hackers would accept. And she kept going back and forth because the bit rate, the exchange rate for Bitcoin,
that's funny. The bit
changed.
Rate.
Yeah,
sure. It's definitely absolutely something to be careful of. Obviously, if you're a church, but even just personal, having a good like digital hygiene on that account, like I mentioned yesterday, or the watching my buddy Grant losing his entire Steam account scared me straight several years ago, and I've been so much more. I used to be like within 4 or 5 years, I have one password for everything guy, and now everything is a completely different password. That's all randomly generated, and it's all sitting on a password manager that I'm self-hosting because I don't trust anybody with my stuff anymore. I've got full 180,
right?
Yeah. I was using LastPass for a number of years, and I think it was twice in 1 year they had an amount of data leak out that might have included the passwords. Like that is the one job. This is the one reason I'm using you is to not leak this, and you've leaked it twice in 1 year. So that's I got inspired to jump.
It was a paid subscription too, if I recall. So like
I was using the paid version.
Yeah,
sure. It was dumb. So thanks again, Mike, for coming in and talking about this. It's definitely an important topic, not one that I think gets enough coverage, especially in the church media world.
Agreed.
But with that, we're going to transition just like last week into our third sort of segment of the day, which we call Blackout. Nick, I think this might not be a bad time for you to go shut off your lights. We're going to get you automated at some point, so you can just hit a button.
Oh my gosh! I was going to say, are we going to go to logo this time so I can have time to run around in my room?
Nope. This is your incentive to go automate everything.
Let's go. We'll go full screen, Caleb.
Yeah. Blackout is our new segment where we're taking questions from you, either questions that you've submitted here in the chat or during the podcast, or questions that were submitted on Discord or social media throughout the week. And we got a handful that we want to talk about today. If you have any more, feel free to drop them down in the comments, and we'll handle them until we run out of time today. We got about 20 minutes or so. And if we run out of questions, we'll just talk about whatever we want to, because we got stuff too. So one of the questions that came up a couple times in the comments, and even a little bit that Mike mentioned as well, is password managers. Obviously, we were just talking about them. Is there any specific password managers that we would recommend? I know I had a conversation with Mike before he came on and everything, and I believe he specifically recommended 1Password was the tool he was using. They do have a free version, I believe, that can do the 2-factor authentication and everything. I'm a big fan of Bitwarden. That's the system that I use. I self-host it, so it's like totally free. And self-hosting mean I run it as a server at home because it's a completely open source and everything. So I'm not trusting any company with my data. It's all personal. Like I have it. Nobody can get it. Oh, don't try to get it. Mike, help me out. We're now very secure over here. But those are the ones that I personally would point people towards.
Yeah. One of the things I loved with our conversation with Mike too is just like he talked about that some people are available for hire to see where your the infrastructure problems are within your own cybersecurity.
Right.
And sometimes it's you just don't know what you don't know. So having someone come through your system and look at the vulnerabilities, it's really, I think, the first step to getting to the point where you don't have those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I alluded to it in the very beginning, but so the reason we had the thought of bringing Mike on and talking about this today is a number of weeks ago, I was having trouble with the home networking setup, and I texted Mike. I was like, here's my problem. Can you help me figure it out? And he almost immediately said, like, can we talk on the phone? Like this would be easier. And then he told me basically like, yeah, I can fix your problem, but you need to know that the way that you have things set up right now, all of your traffic, like every device on your home network is like publicly exposed. You don't have any security. I understand you have a server that you need to, have available, but like the way you've configured it is terribly unsafe, to the point of where he was able to talk about like he put his red hat on for a minute, and he was telling me things that he was able to identify about my network and hardware on my desktop.
That's not good.
Within 5 minutes of using sort of his tools, right? I was like, oh my goodness. And immediately we were talking about solutions, and now we're all Ubiquity and we're protected. We got a firewall. All the ports are locked down. It's incredible. And Blackbar has made a lot of things made a lot of decisions and purchases recently to make sure that we're all safe on that front. But I'm a relatively tech savvy person, and I didn't know how badly misconfigured my home setup was, because it's just not a world that I've really dived into. So even if you consider yourself somewhat, maybe you do have a password manager, you do, like, it's worth talking to someone who knows about these kinds of things, and figure out where you might have some vulnerabilities that you wouldn't expect, because the price is always cheaper preventing it than it is recovering from it afterwards. So be safe out there, kids.
Like Mike said, it's never a small amount. It's a large amount. It's believe it or not, I've also heard stories where people will barter with their hackers, because they want money, right? And if it's too but they start super high because they need you to pay, and they know you're going to you're not going to be able to pay something, so they'll try to get you paid what you can.
Yeah, that's not good. It's not a fun time.
No. Just protect the data,
Yes. Yeah. Another question that we had towards the beginning of the podcast today, going back to the copyright conversation, was specifically about getting permission to play someone else's Christian music on YouTube in your video or live stream. So music licensing is a super fun, very exciting, interesting topic. It's not. But it's something that's super important. And I know, especially in 2020, when all these churches were going online for the first time ever, and they were playing the music that they do usually like pre-service or during announcements and whatnot, and they just threw it to the stream because, of course, what else are you going to throw? And then all of a sudden on Facebook or on YouTube, their streams were getting muted or completely ripped off. They were getting strikes against them. It's a whole big hullabaloo. And yes, there is a process to getting legal rights to doing these sorts of things. The overwhelming majority of churches I know use CCLI. I don't know what CCLI stands for. Maybe I should have looked that up. It's fine. But CCLI is sort of a general subscription that you can pay for that gives you legal access to either playing copyrighted music in your church service and getting permission to do that, or they have separate tiers of licensing to be able to use that copyrighted work in a number of other sort of use cases. One of those use cases is streaming specifically. So if I come back over to this,
while you're doing that, Caleb will tell you what CCLI stands for. It's Christian Copyright Licensing International.
There you go.
So very much like CCM.
Right. So they have different kinds of licenses that do different kinds of things specifically in the streaming world. So there's a base streaming license that allows you to stream your services and sort of play music that is written, owned by other people. And then the CCLI Plus license is where you get into being able to play the master recordings from other people. And using multi-tracks, if you're familiar with that, all in the worship world, using chunks of or instruments from these master tracks in your worship set or whatever, this is the license you need to be looking for. And we can go down here to pricing, and there's definitely a pretty significant difference. So this doesn't look like too much. It's $80 for the normal streaming license, $159 a year, $80 a year for normal, $159 a year for the plus. But you can see that this is determined specifically by attendance size. So now if you're a church of, instead of 45, you're a church of 500, these numbers start to scale pretty quick. So if that is going to be something that you would like to do for your church, there's certainly going to be more of like a cost benefit that you're going to have to look over and decide, oh, that was weird, and see if that's worth it. I know, if I remember correctly, at Grand Rapids First, when we were working there, our worship team had recorded music and they had an album.
Yes.
So for like the next 2 years, I don't know if they're still doing it, but like
I do believe they're still playing the
right.
album.
That was the music that was playing whenever we needed sort of canned stuff in the background. So that could be an easy way to get around.
Oh yeah, because I mean, for them, you know, like you never had to worry about the copyright stuff, and I believe it's still the case. But Facebook's fast. Like as soon as you hear more than like a few seconds of copyrighted music, they'll pull down your stream because that's not something they're going to mess with. So your own copyrighted music, original, will save you from that.
Right. Now, it is also worth noting that just because that you get legal permission to have these kinds of things, that doesn't mean that Facebook knows that or that YouTube knows that. So it's still likely that their automatic stuff is going to grab you. Now, there is a process after that to sort of like appeal it. And so like, yes, I do have permission and kind of go through that process, but it can be slow, and sometimes people still get hit for the automated process even after they've proven that they've got permission. It's not a perfect system. So if you want to avoid it entirely, getting muted or any of this sort of problem, I would just try to not play that kind of music or find music that's in public domain or whatever. Even doing something as simple as, you know, recording a good Sunday morning service that your church has done, and then trying to get the mix pretty good in post and using that to play beforehand. That could be a way around it. But yeah, it's a tricky world. It's a tricky. If you're gonna go into it, just expect some headaches along the way. That's for sure. Copyright's not fun. Another question that we had, not in the comments here today, but it was a conversation that happened over on our Discord this week, was specifically regarding a hearing that happens to be going on in the governments right now around social media and its effects and impacts specifically on minors and children. Nick, do you think there's an effect of social media on minors and children?
Yeah, there probably is.
Yeah, that's
you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Next
like
topic.
Right. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, man.
They've got CEOs and representatives from basically every major social media platform. I know Mark Zuckerberg is there. The guy, I don't know his name off the top of my head, that runs TikTok was there, and he was getting grilled.
Congressman, I'm Singaporean.
Yeah, pretty inappropriately. But yeah, it's the government. What are you going to do? And talking about the effects of social media in general on children and how it's impacting culture and the responsibilities that they have. I don't want to watch the hearing again and sort of go over it blow by blow.
Sure.
But I do think, you know, it's an interesting conversation to have in the space of church production and church media. Like, we generally haven't talked too much about social, like what should a children's ministry social account look like? I know a lot of churches that have social accounts specifically children's ministry. Most of the time they're just posting like, this is the Bible verse that we talked about this week. They're talking to the parents more than it is the children. But realistically, that there are a lot of kids on social media. If you have a social media account for children, are you therefore encouraging that kids should be on social media as a church? Should it even be legal for minors or whatever? Most social media platforms have a rule of, I think you have to be 13 legally, like technically,
I believe that's correct,
to get on. But I mean, it's not too hard to lie about your age on the internet. Some people are dishonest on there, if you would believe it. Nick, do you have an opinion on like, you don't have any kids right now? Let's say you did have one. His name is Caleb, of course. Would you let Caleb on the internet or have a social media account?
You know, me and Tori have talked about this sometimes and stuff. It's such a difficult thing, because I also think, like, from the aspect of some of the things we've also talked about, like digital missionary and stuff like that, there's definitely a side of it that's useful for spreading the gospel, right? But at the same time, there is an amount of the wild west of social media, which is still being figured out. You know, our generation will be the first one to really, truly understand how much social media affects us into our later years. Being we were the first ones that had social media come out when we were young. I don't know, man. I feel like there is an age where I would not want my child being on social media. And like, I know 13's the current thing for most sites, but I kind of feel like I would be like, no, maybe not until you're 18. But that's that's not the world we live in either. Right. You know, it's the internet can be a scary place for somebody who's not an adult.
Yes. But I am an adult and it's still a scary place often, right?
Especially unsupervised.
Yeah. Right. There's certainly a whole separate conversation that's probably not one for this podcast on whether the government should be deciding if children should be allowed on social media or not, or whether that's just explicitly a parental choice or anything like that. But you can go to a different podcast to argue about that one way or the other. But yeah, I definitely think, you know, it's something to be careful about. And I think even as a church, generally speaking, you know, using the topic we brought about earlier about like what would a kid's social media account look like for a church or whatever, I would be pretty hesitant personally to make content explicitly for children to be able to be interacting with it or whatever. I think it's a little bit different if you're just hosting like your kids' church service, or like making content that like the parents can then use to bring to their kids or anything. But I don't know. There's always something said about like setting a precedent for that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I want you know, the kids to jump on YouTube to be able to watch our content, but that means there's other videos showing up in the feed. Right. That's, I don't know. It's worth a conversation. I think I avoid it personally.
You know, it's funny because I feel like age and fatherhood has probably changed our opinions a little bit on this topic. I think 10 years ago we would have slightly different opinions on this, but like, you know, there's truth in the wisdom that comes with experience, right? And I don't see, you know, anyone under 13 being mature enough to be able to navigate the internet on their own. Especially when there are people on the internet who are out there maliciously. Yeah.
We talked about them today.
We did. We did.
Tori is saying that Caleb Mayo doesn't have a good ring to it. You know, that's just your opinion. You know, I disagree.
You know, I might share that opinion, Caleb, but
that's also just your opinion.
Oh my God.
Cool. I don't see any additional questions. We have 7 more minutes to fill, so I have topics that I would love to talk about that I think are interesting. Unless we get any more, and we can flip. Unless Nick, you have anything that's super exciting.
We were talking before the podcast. There was something, I don't remember the name of it, but I think it's related to your lighting system that you were explaining to me, or
my lighting system.
Yeah.
my organization system. It wasn't lighting.
Yes.
It was organization. Okay. So this is, we've talked about in the podcast before how I tend to branch out into a number of hobbies on a regular basis. And although I am certainly medicated for the ADHD, it doesn't seem to do anything about that. And my hobbies have, among my hobbies have been 3D printing. That's been something that I have explored pretty heavily, usually the printing of overpowered Nerf guns. But I also have been, we're sort of in the process right now of reorganizing a big chunk of our house and moving different rooms around to be sort of have different purposes and whatnot. And I'm going to be moving my office to a smaller location, which means I'm going to have less storage, which means I need to make better use of the storage that I have. And I have discovered this open source 3D printed community built organization modular system called Gridfinity, and it looks kind of like this. Okay. All right. And the idea is that all of your various things, I mean, this is a very like bright color rainbow.
Yeah, I was going to say this reminds me of like something from the 90s.
Yeah, definitely. It was developed by a guy named Zach Friedman, and the idea is not necessarily to be like the most efficient thing possible and the most compact whatever, but to be able to open a drawer or whatever and have all of your stuff very quickly, easily visible, accessible, whatever, and throw out all of your proprietary packages and whatever, for whether it be screws and bolts and ratchets and whatever else, and use this system for everything. And I am in the process of doing that for everything in my world, whether that be soldering irons or my Flipper Zero that we talked about yesterday. I've got a little holder for it, my TV remote. And the cool thing is, because it is open source, people can design their own. And like, I've designed several. Nick, you would know, like, so we've got these cards that our Black Magic records on Black Magic 6K, right? And I needed a place to store them, and I 3D printed this part of the Gridfinity, and it's got like little boxes on the bottom, and this right here, and they just slide in just like that perfectly, you know.
Nice.
With a little bit of 3D modeling experience. Now you've got a holder for everything in one drawer. And it's taking over my life. I am trying to figure out how I could put there's next to nothing left on my desk anymore because I've Gridfinity'd my entire life. And it's amazing. But for anybody and like who's mildly techie and nerdy, whatever, and needs to organize a bunch of stuff, like, oh man, it's so cool. And the amount of already accessible, because people will make this stuff and they just upload it for free online, and you could download it and print it yourself, whatever. It's all free. Nobody's charging anything for that. It's been so much fun. I've been nerding out about it.
She hasn't commented it yet, but I can hear my wife typing, "Oh, that would be something really great that you can print, Nick." Since she bought me a 3D printer for Christmas a few years ago, and perhaps I have not utilized it as often as I can, but I mean, you showed me those the SSD holder thing there. I could see that being incredibly helpful, especially organizing some of our other gear and tools and cables and all those things. That could be
I'm planning the new office I'm moving into will also function like partially as a studio. And I'm planning on one of my drawers having a Gridfinity set up to hold up just like a bunch of the big old like batteries with the chargers, right? So they're just slotted in, whatever. And people have built, they've designed what look like almost toolboxes where you can just take all of these grid things that you have and you plop them in and they all snap together, and then you can just take it and go wherever, and it's all 3D printed and it's magical.
That's awesome.
So there are so many things.com is a website that I use and a lot of other people use for like, it's a free Thangs with an A.
Thangs. Okay.
This is like a website specifically for like 3D models that people upload for printing, doing sort of whatever you want. And Gridfinity is so popular, they had to turn it into its own category because there were so many people uploading. I mean, you look here, we've got cable organizers, we've got desk organizers. We got stuff for your pencils, stuff for like very specific tools. It's been fun. I've been messing around with it. I suggest, if you're a nerd and you're in need of some organization, this has been a effective tool for me to jump into. Mm-hmm.
So. We had one more question and posted, but I don't think we're going to have time for it. I think we're actually a little bit over time at this moment. But Ariana Relez, sorry if I mispronounced that. I know you asked, what's a good audio console for a 250 to 300 person church? If we had more time, we definitely would get to it. But something that you can do, and I encourage this for everyone watching, if you want to continue the conversation or find community where we, a bunch of like-minded Christian creatives are together, check out our Discord. I believe it's actually it just scrolled away, but it was there. Discord.blk.bar. If you join our community, we have a lot of opportunities where you can ask questions from other people who are very knowledgeable in this industry. And it's also just a great place to hang out. We have something called Fourth Fridays, where we have a teaching once a month, and there's just other community events as well. We'll see if maybe we can get something that a Fourth Friday where we have some more information about cybersecurity, if that's something people are interested.
Let us know.
Let us know if that's something that you guys would like. But yeah, that's Ariana. Sorry we couldn't get to that question today, but if you want to, we'll try to answer it in our Discord.
Cool. Well, I think with that, then we have hit our time for the episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in and watching today. Hopefully it was helpful in keeping yourself secure and using copyrighted material fairly and organizing your crap.
Oh boy.
And we will see you all next week. 2 weeks from now. Sorry. See ya.